There it is. Hello, everybody.
There. Welcome to our monthly webinar. Today, our workshop is about having a gut-friendly diet. We're going to dive into some interesting information and research on gut health, why it matters, and what we can eat and do to support gut health.
Yes, and we would love to hear from you. So, as you might have noticed, it's just our faces, which is awesome because you can be in the background eating your lunch or doing whatever you need to do, except for checking your emails because you're not going to get anything out of this if you're working while you listen. So try to come and be as present as possible today. We want to encourage you to get your notebooks and your pen so that you can take notes. And we've got our chat box open. Would love to hear from you in our chat box. So feel free to stop in, drop a note, let us know, what are you having for lunch today? And what are you most interested in learning about in our conversation today? Oh my goodness. Look at that. So should we, well, I'm going to go ahead and I'm coming out early in this conversation because maybe you know this already if you've been following well-balanced nutrition for some years, maybe not, but your very own nutrition coach, Lucy, has been on the gut health journey for almost 10 years, specifically for my own well-being. And I'll share a little bit more about that later on, but just for anybody that's out there that's like, I've heard that maybe people don't like to talk about their gut health. It's maybe a little bit icky. Bathroom talk isn't everybody's first choice of conversation, but our gut is so important for our overall well-being. And we are also personally invested, myself especially, in the conversation. So if you're having anything that feels icky or vulnerable or something that you really don't want to talk about, but you really need to talk about, then just know that we really totally get it. So there's my disclaimer. And Thomas is here and he's having a fish sandwich and salad. That sounds delightful. I'm hoping, is that homemade fish sandwich, Thomas? All right, Kristen's going to introduce the rest of us.
So for those of you who are new to well-balanced nutrition, we just want to take a minute to tell you about our company. We offer nutrition and wellness coaching in the Triangle and Triad of North Carolina. And currently we have 3 dietitians available to help you with your personalized nutrition journey. Lucy, Kristen, and not on camera today is Bella in the middle.
All right, so this is where we want to hear from y'all. I was inspired by a client about this conversation and how it's not exactly everybody's favorite, but then I thought about the Pepto Bismol commercial from some years ago. And it was, oh God, I can't remember it. I told Kristen I was going to remember the jingle so I could sing it for y'all. But raise your hand if you just seeing this and you remember that little jingle where it's like upset stomach, diarrhea, constipation, Pepto-Bismol. Okay, that was embarrassing. But what I appreciate about the Pepto-Bismol commercial is that reminder that this is a very normal human experience. So type a 1 in the chat box if you have any idea what I'm talking about. And if you do remember the words, then put those out there for us and we can all sing together.
Yeah, I used to think Pepto was like a cure-all for every tummy problem.
That's a really good comment because that's what they were advertising. But really, now we know Pepto was really just a mask to cover up symptoms. And that's what we want to talk about today is not just about covering up symptoms, but how to prevent and manage those common symptoms that the Pepto jingle reminds us of. Thanks, Brian. I'm glad I'm not the only one. All right, what are we going to learn about today, Kristen?
Yeah, so first we want to talk about why gut health matters. What is it that our gut is doing for us, and why do we need to take care of it? If anybody's having gut symptoms, you know how important it is for your health and happiness to have a happier gut. But we're going to talk about what the gut does, and I'm going to take you on a little tour of the insides and have you get to know the occupants inside your gut, because that is really important to the rest of the conversation. Then we're going to talk about what happens when your gut is unhappy or unhealthy, because that is common. You're not alone if you're in that boat. And then tips for more gut friendly diet and lifestyle choices. And here's a good place to let you know that it is impossible to give everybody a gut friendly diet that's just across the board. There are certain choices that tend to help most people, but your gut and your body is so individual that this is a really tricky thing to talk to a group about with diet. So just know that it depends and it's personal.
Which I've heard before.
Disclaimer we always say. So tell us a little bit, Lucy, about some of the jobs our gut has.
Well, as many people might have guessed, one of the first jobs of our gut, and just to kind of give a quick synopsis of the gut that we keep referring to, when people think of the gut, I think often the conversation is centered around the stomach. And as we'll be talking, it's like the gut and the digestive system is more than just the stomach. It's the whole system. So we're talking about all the way from the mouth, and even in my recent studies on this topic, it's like our digestion doesn't just start in the mouth with the saliva. Our digestion starts in the brain, which is why we'll talk a little bit about how you eat and why that's important to consider. But when we talk about the gut, we're talking about all the way from top to bottom and everything in between. So the first obvious job that our gut has is we're processing food. So that's where we're breaking it down, and our wonderful bacteria that exists in the gut that we call the microbiome is where our guts gets really hard at work, and it starts breaking down the food that we're eating into those nutrients that you might hear about with the different vitamins and minerals. What's next, Kristen?
Well, what does it do with those vitamins and minerals and food particles that are now broken down? Well, it is like a project manager, sending those things to the right places. So all the different systems in the body, whether that's skin or to your brain, it is in charge of delivering those things that you need.
This one Kristen's really excited to tell you about. So I'm going to let her keep going.
So it is also a place where our immune system is very important. So if you want a healthy immune system, you've got to have a healthy gut. And that's because 70% of your immune system is located in your digestive tract. And this cool looking blob is actually a immune cell called a dendritic cell. And this guy is like your immune system's information officer. Or maybe you can say border control, because it goes around collecting samples of all the contents in your gut. And it's like fingerprinting them and filing them and making sure it knows exactly what is there. And one of the reasons it does this is to make sure that there aren't any intruders or things that are going to potentially hurt you. And if it does detect that, then it has that information, and it'll go look for T cells or special soldiers that will come and attack that particular agent. So fun looking guy, and a very important immune cell that is in your digestive tract. And now you know. Another cool guy is this macrophage. So another job that our digestive tract is like a trash man. It'll eliminate toxins and waste from our body. And that's why you saw the information officer collecting that information. Well, then the macrophage is something that's just going to suck it up like those little octopus arms and ingest it whole and break it down and take care of it so that you don't have to suffer from that. So these are really cool cells that in the digestive tract will take care of the things that aren't supposed to be there.
All right, I just have to take a moment to pause and find out. Type a one in the chat box for us if anybody else is just like in awe of your gut right now, because it's so busy doing all of these things and you're just like, whatever, I'm just eating food. And for if you're me, it's like, I'm just chewing on my fingernails. God knows what is going down there. And my body's just like, all right, guys, let's get to work. We got to clean out. And I'm just, if you're feeling as in awe or even just a little tiny bit of this awe, let us know, because thanks, Kristen. we kind of geek out about this, so thanks for joining us. All right, we want to hear from you otherwise. So we added a poll because even though it is a really broad subject, we want to find out what exactly y'all or maybe your partners are dealing with. So I'm going to start this poll, and these are 100% anonymous, but we want to know what's the most common gut complaints or issues that you might be dealing with. Okay, I'm going to really publish it now. There we go. Should have just popped up on your screen. And, you know, it's fascinating because for anybody out there that deals with frequent tummy issues, then it might be hard to answer with just one, right? Where it's like, what's the day of the week? That might be an indicator for what symptoms you're dealing with, and knowing that that's not uncommon. And it's like, depending on our diet, depending on what's going on with our hormones, can very much change the different symptoms that you might experience within your gut. Let's see. So what do we got? We've got mostly bloating and heartburn are the big answers that we're hearing. So mostly bloating or heartburn. Thank you for sharing. I'll go ahead and end that. Cool. All right.
Right. So now you know gut health is important because the digestive tract, it does a million things and it is super cool. Like breaking down food, sending it to the right places, keeping track of everything that's in there, and getting rid of those unwanted intruders. But there's one thing we haven't really discussed in detail yet, and that is the trillions of microbes living in there. It's this nice ecosystem of bacteria, fungi, archaea, and they, although they're super tiny, they play a really major role in our health. And we refer to this as the human microbiome, this collection of microbes living in there. And so just how tiny are these? Well, I want to give you an example. So let's say you're taking a little sample of your gut and the size of a pin, top of a pin, and you're putting that under the microscope to look at it. You're going to see thousands of bugs in that little sample. So it's rather amazing that these tiny little things can have such a major impact. We know that they're connected to things like our mental health, our metabolism. They can link to certain inflammatory. They can either be helpful or harmful in inflammatory situations. And there's so much more that we are learning about them. The research is kind of fairly new, and it's kind of just snowballing. So there's a lot that we have yet to learn, and there is a lot that we do know now, and that's what we're going to share with you today. First, I don't know, Lucy, if you want to share a little bit about how we create, like how do we have this community of microbes in our gut from birth to our elderly years.
Yeah, so if you can see those little pictures, we know they're really small, but recognizing this interesting graphic that shows when you start out in your mother's womb, there's not a lot of bacteria, and the bacteria that is populated comes from mom's diet in the beginning, and then more specifically, you're not really taking much in. Inside, obviously, but then on the way out is when some more of your gut bacteria is populated. So they have found a difference between people that were born through C-section versus vaginal, with the more bacteria diversity being through people that were born vaginally, which is just fascinating. And then going on through your life cycle, there's just all kinds of different factors that play into that diversity of different bacteria that we keep talking about. So some of it is going to be genetic. And I always think about, I don't know if my mom's out in the audience, but my mom versus her husband, and her husband's just got like an iron gut, and the man can eat whatever he wants. And we come from a family with not an iron gut. And so we have to be a lot more careful. And it's fair to say, like, it's not like they're eating very similar diets. So it's not just what you put into your mouth, but some of it is going to be more what your gene pool is, what medications you've been on. And of course, lifestyle and your environment overall is going to play a role throughout your life cycle.
Yeah, it even boils down to, how much you played in the dirt as a kid, or you can get microbes, especially in the younger years of life, from the people that you're around. So not only from your mom, but then from the people who are delivering you in the room. So, and it continues to change as, there are certain, on one hand, I've heard that our gut microbiome is very resilient, and it likes to, like all things, keep equilibrium. And on the other hand, I've heard that it's transient; it changes quite a bit. So it's a rather fascinating thing to think about. Food, of course, plays a role in addition to these other factors, and we know in general that probiotics, which is what we call those good microbes, like to help us eat our plants, which we will discuss later on. And we also know that they stop growing when they run out of food. So that's kind of why you might hear a lot of people talk about plants to help our microbes. But first, let's continue to get to know these microbes a little bit, just a little bit more, because I have a fun question that I came across. So how do these microbes stay in our gut? Wouldn't they just get washed out like water and our food? Well, how are they really taking up residence? Any thoughts on that?
If y'all are just scratching your head too, just know I'm right there with you, because this is fascinating.
Well, our digestive tract isn't just one smooth tube. It has lots of bumps and grooves, and the small intestine has these little finger-like villi, and in the large intestine you have these folds. So they find these little crevices, and they just, how tiny they are, so they set up shop. Some of them, however, just kind of move right through, and you can still benefit from them even though they move through you. And others, they just kind of find their little home, a little niche, and they stay there. So this is just a neat little illustration of all the things going on in your gut and the different layers. You see those tight junctions. You see a mucous membrane that is protective. So again, just another reason to be fascinated and appreciative of your digestive tract.
I wonder if this is also like fair to equate to like the coral reefs, where you've got all kinds of fish and different sea life living within the coral reef. It looks like maybe our gut is a very small version of that.
That's so funny you said that, because I kept thinking of that analogy, but I just got back from Jamaica where we snorkeled and saw all these things. And I'm like, maybe it's just because that's the top of my mind. But I absolutely thought of that as well.
Yeah. So if you need a real life visual, then just think about those beautiful pictures of the coral reef. And that is the inside of your body. What? All right. Let's talk about a little bit of what we touched on before, which is what can happen when our gut is unhappy. So whether it is that bloating or heartburn that we talked about, or that you all let us know is bothering your tummies, there's just a lot of different factors that can be going on here. So I'm gonna let Kristen explain this graphic for us.
Well, not a lot to explain, just that there are lots of different things that we see, and gut health can be so tricky just because there are several things that could be going on. Stress is a major factor for gut health that can often be overlooked. You may have intruders that are causing problems. You could have an unbalance or an imbalance of the good and the bad microbes. So your good microbes are going to be your friends. They're going to be like anti-inflammatory. They're going to help you digest your food, which could eliminate bloating and things of that nature. And then you've got the unfriendly ones who are pro-inflammatory. They're causing issues. And then if you happen to be eating the food that they like, they're going to only continue to grow. Another issue that could happen is if we have more bacteria higher up in the digestive tract. Normally in the small intestine, we don't see a ton of microbes there, but you might have an overgrowth that can cause some problems there. So just all this to say is that when something goes wrong, it's usually not one thing that's easy to pinpoint, unfortunately.
Right. Yeah, and for anybody that is experiencing issues, is that our next slide? Oh yeah. For people that have chronic ongoing issues, then we do recommend exploring a whole team of support. So of course, your friendly dietitians at Well Balanced Nutrition are here to talk about how to eat specifically for whatever symptoms that you're dealing with. And in order to find out if there's something that's more of an underlying issue, like what Kristen talked about with that small bacteria overgrowth, it's called SIBO, so small intestinal bacteria overgrowth, is something that is best to go to a professional GI expert or specialist. The gastroenterologist is going to be able to give you those different blood tests, breath tests, to find out what might be going on for you, and also to rule out some issues that might need more medical attention. So that's where this pro tip comes in, because especially if things are like going okay, but maybe you've had a history of some gut health issues, then it's good to have this person already on your team for if anything comes up. So just a quick example, I myself was doing pretty well managing my symptoms with my tummy for the past year, just through my diet. And then we sent our kid to daycare and got all of the things, including a stomach virus, in January. And my gut just hasn't been quite the same ever since. And unfortunately, I do not have a gastroenterologist on my team right now, but I'm working on that. So just that's why I mentioned this, because if there's even just a little inkling that you might need a little bit more help, then know that we encourage a holistic approach, including this Western medicine that can help us pinpoint maybe what's going on.
Yeah, and the advantage of doing it early on is it gets you in the system, because if anybody's familiar with the health system, it can be a long time to get an appointment, and then you get a consult, and then it takes a while for the follow-up. So just getting ahead of that, especially now in the present, it seems like things are taking even longer than ever before.
Yeah, our supply chain issues have not been limited to the grocery store. All right. Well, let's talk about what we can do about it, because that's probably what brought you here today. So what can we eat to have a happy and healthy gut? Which, as usual, we did put our disclaimer of it depends, and it's really of where are you starting now? So how happy and healthy is your gut right now?
Yeah, so it all depends on if you have a pretty healthy balance and diverse community of good microbes, then this next slide is for you. In a recent Stanford study, let me tell you the name of it, gut microbiota targeted diets modulate human immune status. So they were not only looking at your gut bugs, but they were also looking at inflammation markers. And they wanted to know what was going on when people increased fiber intake, and then when they increased their intake of fermented foods. So fermented foods, regardless of anybody's gut health at baseline, improved inflammation, so reduced inflammation, improved the variety of healthy gut or healthy probiotics or microbes in the gut, and it increased them. So fermented foods is something that anybody can really consider adding into the diet to have a diverse and flourishing microbiome. I'd like to take a minute to really talk about fermented foods and list some, and maybe talk about how you could include them in your diet. I'll put you on the spot real quick, Lucy. What are your favorite fermented foods?
My most favorite right now is kimchi. I'm going through a kimchi phase. So throw one in the chat box if you have tried it. And if not, then if you like Asian food and spicy food, I highly recommend it. But kimchi is a fermented cabbage and usually onions and I think carrots. That's in like a kind of spicy vinegar based, what would you marinade? Brine. So that's my go-to. And I was going to actually ask, because I think this might have come up in the past, but we talk about fermented foods and you can find pickles. Those are technically fermented, but when you get them on the shelf from the grocery store, I think there's the processing makes it so that it's no longer carrying the same benefits.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. So when you look for fermented foods to help with gut health, you want them to contain the live bacteria that you want to ingest. So you're going to find the best products in the refrigerated section that haven't really been pasteurized, because the pasteurization process will kill off those bugs. Now, some might add them back in, but in general, the shelf-stable pickles and kimchi, whatever else you might find there, are just not going to be the same for gut health.
Well, the kimchi is kept in the refrigerator section.
Always?
Always.
Perfect.
What about beer? Does that count?
So that is a good question. In this particular study that I'm citing, they did not include beer as a fermented food that they wanted their group to include. Now, they didn't tell the people that they had to avoid any food or change their diet in any way other than adding these fermented foods. I'll just say that beer was not one of the fermented foods that the registered dietitian of that study suggested.
And it's interesting because I would argue like, oh, well, maybe it's because of the alcohol content, but kombucha, at least that's what picture I'm looking at. I think that's kombucha, and kombucha is a fermented drink. If you haven't tried it, y'all, it's also delightful, but it's a fermented tea that's usually flavored with some kind of juice or something else delicious.
And it does contain like 0.05% alcohol or something.
Right. But the alcohol can be counterproductive for some people in their gut health. But it wouldn't be necessarily worth worrying about in kombucha specifically. Morgan, are you brewing your own beer at home? I don't know if that matters, but I know that often beer that's mass produced is going to also go through more of a pasteurization because they're going to need to make it super safe to share with the masses.
Yes,
and
that's correct.
Yeah, not all pickles are the same. The shelf versus the non-shelf. If you make your own pickles or pickle your own vegetables, then that's going to be different. Or again, if you get them in the refrigerator section, then those will probably be more in line with what Kristen's talking about here.
So fermented vegetables like pickles, and there's other fermented veggies out there. There's kimchi. What do you use your kimchi? Just like as a topping, or do you put it on sandwiches?
If I'm really low on vegetables, then it's just kind of on the side of whatever. But typically, I usually have it in a rice bowl. So I'll have my rice and quinoa and then whatever protein, and then I'll have some kimchi and some other veggies on top.
Nice. I am afraid to try kimchi, so appreciate that. But the probiotic rich foods that are currently in my house would include good culture cottage cheese. So it is cottage cheese with probiotics. Yogurt. I love Okioi's 000 yogurt. So low sugar yogurts are important, and yogurts can also have a lot of additives. So just be careful. In the study that I'm referring to, they did suggest plain yogurt. I'm not a fan of plain yogurt, but I understand why they were doing that because they didn't really want the sugar and the other additives. But if you need help down the yogurt aisle, you can just consult one of your friendly dietitians to help you sort that out. But Okioi's Too Good is a brand that's usually lower in sugar, and Siggy's is a wonderful brand to consider. And then I do love kombucha tea, so I have that. That is another thing that can have a ton of added sugar. So they'll load those up with sugar or juice. So just be aware of that if you want to try kombucha. Kefir. It's not something I drink, but there's water kefir and a milk-based kefir that can easily go into smoothies, or you can put it in your cereal. Mixing it with a little bit of fruit or something of that nature can take away some of the tanginess that it'll have. What else can we eat that's fermented?
Looking at the picture, I'm also thinking sauerkraut.
Sauerkraut. That's what I was thinking can be found down the aisle or in the refrigerator.
Yep. So we'll definitely encourage, if you are a sauerkraut eater, definitely going for the refrigerated option or making your own.
Yeah. And then questionable items that may or may not contribute a ton of probiotics would be things like apple cider vinegar. You can make a salad dressing with apple cider vinegar, and there's brands that sell it with the mother, which is the live SCOBY kind of thing that produces the bacteria. And sriracha. I did not know that sriracha was made with fermented peppers. Did you?
No, I put that stuff on everything. Good motivation to keep going.
And then some people drink like the brine juice from like pickled vegetables, and that was mentioned in the study that contains probiotics.
Yeah, I do a lot of pickled jalapenos, but I do not. I drizzle a little bit of the juice on top of my nachos, kick it up a notch. But that's always in a can, so I don't think that counts.
Yeah. So let me quickly go through the list if you're taking notes so that you can write down these fermented foods to consider adding to your diet. In the study, they were told to add to the diet on a daily basis, pretty much, and had, the more that the participants could incorporate, the more benefit that they saw. Mm-hmm. So you've got low sugar yogurt, kefir, fermented cottage cheese or cottage cheese with probiotics in it, kimchi, fermented vegetables, a vegetable brine, kombucha, sriracha, apple cider vinegar, and tempeh was another one that is technically a fermented product, but it's questionable because of the processing, whether the probiotics are live. All right, switching gears, another major part of the study was fiber. Mm-hmm. Now, we talked about that the good bacteria like to help you eat your vegetables, and these are often referred to as prebiotics, the fibers that can feed the good bacteria. And these are found in a variety of whole plant foods. I also mentioned that if the bacteria doesn't have enough food to eat, they will die off. Mm. So if you do have a good variety and you can tell that your gut is pretty happy and healthy, you want to continue to encourage and to feed and to supply goods to your friendly microbes down there by eating a variety of plant foods. So one gal out of the UK, her name is Megan Rossi. She's known as the gut health doctor. She's a dietitian and a researcher. She has a great recommendation. She challenges us to get 30 plant points a week, meaning aim to eat 30 different fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes, nuts, and seeds, including herbs and spices. So getting that variety is going to help you keep the variety of microbes high and lively. However, fiber is not really everybody's friend. And in this study, they, like I said, fermented foods helped everybody. Fiber, on the other hand, was a mixed bag. For some, it did improve inflammation, and it did improve the variety of microbes. And for others, it increased inflammation. Mm. So if you suffer from digestive issues, you might notice that fiber tends to bother you as well.
So fascinating. It's so personal, y'all. I can just say from a lived experience that I like ever since I became a dietitian, I've been fairly obsessed with getting lots of fiber and so then being a little bit more cautious when there is a flare up. So you see the picture is a good little reminder. Like it's not that our gut is maybe chronically inflamed. It might be going through, maybe there was just an episode or something that you ate or some extra stress that kind of puts you in this flare up space. Some people have that with heartburn. I've heard numerous clients talk about how they never really had heartburn issues. And then they went through this really stressful season and all of a sudden they're having heartburn issues. So just understanding that there might be periods of time where your gut is responding to something that you've eaten or some exterior stress. And that's when we probably need to be a little bit more cautious on the fiber. So for me, for instance, when there's a flare-up situation happening, then I'm not eating the tortillas that have 10 grams of fiber because that's probably just going to upset my gut. I'm not eating cauliflower. I might do broccoli in small portions, but those cruciferous vegetables that, tend to make people feel a little bit more gassy or bloated, those can just flare up anybody that's in this particular state. And it's not to say that you can always feel it, but there is a level of knowing that your body's always talking to you. And when we can tune in and listen, then we can start to respond in the most loving and supportive way, knowing like, okay, cool, I'm feeling really good. I can eat lots of fiber right now. Or, oh, hey, I need to be a little bit more careful. And hopefully we're going to talk about the different kinds of fiber next.
There's not a particular slide for it, so feel free.
Okay. All right. So we did just want to let people know that there's different types of fiber. We could probably do a whole hour presentation on this subject alone. So just in summary, there's the soluble fiber and insoluble fiber. So if you write that on your page, then under soluble fiber, those are the things that break down. It's called digestible fiber because when you eat it, then your body's like, okay, cool, I'm going to break this down. So think about those. Speaking of commercials on gut health, think about the Metamucil commercials where they took the powder and put it in the water and then it just disappeared. So that's an example of a soluble fiber. And that can be really good for people, even if you're in a flare up. That soluble fiber can be really calming for the gut. So I don't know if they talked about that in Kristen's study, but lots of recommendations for people that experience IBS or just chronic inflammatory bowel syndrome, as it stands for. Then the soluble fiber can be a really good first defense, I guess I would say, where you start with things like oatmeal, because that's going to be really typically easy for the gut to break down. Other soluble fiber examples are just kind of left my brain, but recognizing that those soluble fibers can be really helpful for that initial flare-up situation versus the insoluble. So those are the fibers that don't break down. And those I could go on all day, but the stuff that doesn't break down so easily is going to be more of your bran, like your wheat bran, the insoluble parts of vegetables. I'm trying not to get too graphic. Y'all have probably seen that things that don't get too digested. But some of our food is actually made up of both soluble and insoluble, which can be a little bit more complicated. But just recognizing that there are different kinds of fiber, and we will include a list of those in your follow-up email with this for this presentation, just so that you can have those more specific examples.
Yeah, and just to clarify, when Lucy was saying breaking down, kind of like dissolving in water. So the difference between soluble and insoluble is how they react with water. And we'll have a handout if you're interested, because I know that can just be a tricky subject to understand.
But way more simple. Now, this one's fascinating. So what about what we need to avoid to keep our guts happy and healthy?
Yeah, so we often don't talk about, Lucy and I don't like to say you have to avoid anything in the diet, because in moderation. But we do need to know that certain things in our food system can be irritating our gut. And I want to go over two different kind of research articles. And the first one, they're both looking at emulsifiers. And you might be thinking, emulsa what? So emulsifiers are compounds used in processed foods to help achieve a certain consistency for a long shelf life. So you might notice a lot of gums listed in your ingredients. Those are technically emulsifiers. Um, Other things are those weird things that are hard to pronounce, like polysorbate 80 or sorbiton monoesterate. So these are things that tie the foods together and keep them at the right consistency even over time. So they're great for our food. We can keep it around and we can always have our favorite things. Um, but in general, the idea to limit processed foods is going to be a gut friendly idea. And in this particular picture, you see this is from kind of a research review, and it indicates cell and animal studies suggest these mechanisms inside the gut that are happening with dietary emulsifiers are contributing to irritable bowel or inflammatory bowel disease pathogenesis. So some of the things it's doing is promoting pro-inflammatory microbes, so the bad microbes. It's disrupting the mucus layer that protects. So on the left, I don't know if you can see that green is nice and thick. That is a mucus layer that we want to be there. And then on the right, it's deteriorated. And then you can see things are leaking into those tight junctions that are supposed to keep things out. So those are the ways that scientists are looking into food additives like emulsifiers, and the reasons we want to be really careful about the foods we're ingesting on a regular basis. So just know that little things that you can do, little choices you can make, like perhaps making your own salad dressing, choosing a natural nut butter, choosing whole wheat bread, because sometimes these emulsifiers are in white products, like your white hot dog buns, for instance, to make them fluffy for longer. And then other things like maybe baking your own baked goods rather than grabbing the Little Debbie's or whatever's in the vending machine. That can definitely limit your intake of these food additives that might be really irritating for the gut. It's also just a good idea to check your food labels and know what's in there, not necessarily in an obsessive way, but it's a good practice to know what's in your food, especially the ones that you're eating on an everyday basis or most often. The other thing that I don't necessarily have a study to reference, but it is in the research, is that artificial sugars can alter the microbiome. So I'm talking about like aspartame and Splenda, and saccharin. Those kinds of things that are manufactured are altering the community in our gut kind of in a way that could promote dysbiosis. So I would recommend low-calorie natural sweeteners in place of those, things like stevia or monk fruit. So did that make sense, Lucy, or any questions?
Any questions there? I think that makes a lot of sense. And, you know, I appreciate that big take home of, do you know what's in your food? Like, it is fascinating how we just go through life and you're eating and we're on the go and you've got this place and that place to get to. So you're just going to pick up a sandwich on the way, and that's fine. That's going to happen. And also, if that's becoming a recurring habit, then recognizing that restaurant food or fast food especially is going to have more of these additives that Kristen's talking about, because that's how they keep it cheap. That's how they keep it to the way that they can keep selling. So it's not to say, oh, never do that. And it is to say, how often is that happening? And is that leading to some of these concerns and issues that you might be experiencing? So that's where we can come back into addressing those behaviors and those patterns and help you make better choices more often. And I'll even go in the kitchen with you. Like, we'll just be here. I'll have you hop in the kitchen. We'll go through the pantry. We'll look at things, not judging, just because maybe that doesn't sound like a super fun way to spend an afternoon, but it sounds like a blast to me. I love standing in lines at grocery stores because I just stand there and look at all the labels and see what's in the various candies and other goodies at the checkout aisle. So,
Yes, your well-balanced dietitians will be glad to guide you through the grocery store and help you look through your pantry. Absolutely.
Pretty please.
What
All
are some other things that we might need to limit or avoid?
So I don't know exactly what that was referencing, because this to me was the opportunity to figure out what's the next step. So with that in mind, it's like, okay, well, how do I know what to avoid? My apologies. Someone really kind sent berries to my son, and they sent them to Durham. So they're my apologies. They're trying to contact me. So anyhow, in order to figure out what might be going on with your gut, there's a few steps that we talk through with our clients. One thing is always, if this is a recurring issue and it's not just this acute situation, then we need to start documenting what's going on. So having a food and symptom journal is a game changer. That's helped me figure out a few of my most common triggers. And, it's disappointing, but there's just some things that my gut does not like. So anything that has chia seeds in it is just not working out for me. That stinks, but at least I know. And I wouldn't have known that if I wasn't so very diligent with my food and symptom journal. The food and symptom journal can also help us pick up on patterns. So anybody out there that has a monthly cycle, you might discover, oh, hey, look at that. I'm having some similar symptoms every 3 to 4 weeks. To answer Brandy's question, what about a food sensitivity test? That is definitely something that we talk about with our clients. There are specific blood tests, one in particular that we have experience with. It's called mediator release testing, and that's one that I've done twice. And from my lens, that's been the most beneficial step that I've taken on my gut health journey, is to get a blood test to find out what foods cause inflammation in my body. And it's not always gut specific, but if you have chronic headaches, maybe chronic skin rashes, then those blood tests can be really informative. And then there's more generalized elimination diets. So the checklist is the reminder that some foods are just going to be an issue for more of the population. So a lot of people can't tolerate dairy. So there's conversations we might have had with providers to just step back from dairy for a few weeks and see how your body responds. What would you add to that, Kristen?
That there are food allergies, there are food sensitivities, and there are food intolerances. And it's really important to know the difference. So intolerance is your body's inability or struggle to break down a food. So lactose intolerance is what Lucy was just referring to. And that's your body is lacking the enzymes it needs to break down the sugar in milk. Now, you could also have a dairy sensitivity, and that is your body reacting in an inflammatory way towards the proteins in milk. Those are the antigens that could be causing your immune system to be like, sound the alarm, this is not right for some reason. And then there's food allergies, and these are the things we know really well. If you have a true allergy to peanuts or to shellfish, you're going to have immediate reactions, and it doesn't matter whether you have a tiny little bit of it or a whole plate of it. You are going to respond in an allergic reaction. Versus food sensitivities are dose dependent. You may not notice if you eat a little speck of dairy if you have a dairy sensitivity, yet you will notice if you have a couple servings, for instance. So with a food sensitivity test, we look at how your individual blood sample is responding to 150 different foods and chemicals, and how much of that inflammation, those inflammation markers, are coming out. So it's telling us for that particular dose the type of response that could be happening in your blood. And we don't use Everlywell or some of the common tests out there that you might talk with your alternative provider about, because those are IgG tests, which an IgG, talk about it like a soldier. It might come out if something's going wrong, but it might just be there making sure everything's okay. So it's the presence of that IgG soldier doesn't necessarily mean that you're having a food sensitivity. Versus the mediator release test that we use, it actually, let's say, tests the weapons that come out for war. So for that reason, we find it to be way more accurate and helpful for clients going through that.
And the question, do you work with clients that have a lot of environmental allergies that need to follow diet with that cross with reactive foods? I wouldn't say a lot, but certainly, we've had experiences with that, and that can be really challenging for people. But mostly we work with more food sensitivities versus food allergies.
Indeed.
So we've covered a lot of ground here. And if you're wondering what to do for your next steps, then we definitely want to encourage you to consider that personalized support, whether that's going to be seeking a GI specialist if things are just feeling like they're not manageable through diet, but obviously we would love to schedule a session with you if you're just having some issues, maybe a little bit of bloating, maybe a little bit of irregularity in your bowel movements, and something that can be tackled through your diet. We would love to have you schedule with one of your friendly, well-balanced dietitians. And tell us about this pelvic floor PT real quick.
Yeah, this is something that I was unaware of a couple years ago, but there is a specialty within physical therapists that just focuses on the pelvic floor, which are those muscles that you're going to be using to go to the bathroom. So a lot of people with IBS or anything really in general going on below the waist could potentially benefit from seeing a pelvic floor therapist who can give you an overall assessment to see if there's any dysfunction in the muscles or imbalance, so to speak, and give you some ways to work through that.
And great if you're pregnant or have had a baby, ever had a baby. They're just fantastic. Oh man, darn. I could also go on for an hour about this. So stay tuned for whatever future form this comes out in. But aside from just eating a lot of fiber, especially soluble fiber, I cannot speak highly enough of the Squatty Potty concept. So having a stool in the bathroom, just so y'all know, if you didn't know this, in China, they don't sit on a toilet to go to the bathroom. I think it was China specifically, but in other countries, they squat when they go to the bathroom because, hey, guess what? When you sit down, it like scrunches up your, all that lovely, those pictures that you saw, it scrunches up your digestive system. It's not great for helping you eliminate, but when you squat, it kind of opens things up and lets things go a little smoother. So if you have a little stool laying around, put that in the bathroom and help yourself go. If you lean toward the constipated side, game changer.
Meal timing, gentle movement, meditation, sleep, all also very important lifestyle habits that will support gut health. Stress management, just really quickly going through this, super important for the gut. When you're in stressed out mode, this can have a serious impact on your gut, because if you think about the fight or flight, right? It always goes back to you're being chased by a saber-toothed tiger. So your body is saying, hold on to all of the other organs in the body. Just take a seat. We'll be with you in a minute as soon as we're done figuring out how the heck to get away from this tiger. So your body, when it's stressed, doesn't know that it's not running from a tiger, but the same things happen in your physiology. So your gut motility slows down, right? Those muscles that are pushing things through, that'll slow down. There's evidence that the permeability is affected, so things can get through that aren't supposed to get through. And all this to say, we really need to do two things: manage our stress and make sure we're not eating in a stressed out state.
Mm-hmm. Easier said than done if you have any small humans at home. But one way that we just encourage people to start this is to address, am I stressed right now and I'm about to start eating because I'm hungry, and giving yourself just that one moment mindful breath where it's like, okay, Lucy and Kristen said I need to relax. And literally, if you just take a moment and do a deep, like, a big sigh right there, instantly your body just went into a little bit more of that rest and digest space. So it doesn't have to be like 10 minutes of meditation before you eat, just a big sigh. Or as one of my clients recently told me in a mindful eating study or exercise that she's been working on, the first step that they're teaching is to just smell your food before you start eating it, which also, right? So taking that nice big inhale of whatever you're about to start eating can really, truly put your body into that more relaxed state and help it to digest and do its thing.
Yeah, and then taking time to chew it completely and savor it would also be really important for gut health.
All right, we appreciate you all bearing with us. We know we took a little longer because clearly we really get excited about this topic. So today we had lots that we talked about. We learned all the important processes that our guts are doing for us, what happens when things go wrong, knowing that you are not alone and that your food changes and stress management can really help. And that's what we're here for. So if you're still here and you're thinking like, okay, guys, that was great, then we'd love for you to hop online and visit us at wellbalancednutrition.com so that we can get you set up with a free clarity call so that you can figure out what to do next on your gut health journey. And let's see, Brian's question. He heard last week on a podcast, a health expert said that mouthwashes like Listerine are bad for your gut because it kills the good microbe in your mouth and gut. Any thoughts on this?
Well, I wonder how it could kill the microbes in your gut because you're not really swallowing it.
Ideally, you're not swallowing it. Yeah, so I would say it might, that's the whole point of Listerine, is to kill the bacteria going on in your mouth that causes bad breath. But since it's something that you're just gargling and spitting, then most of that is going to come out. And so first, don't drink your Listerine, and then the bacteria in your mouth is different than what's going on in your gut, and so like I think it's perfectly safe to use that, but maybe just not using too excessively.
Mm-hmm.
Good question. Thanks for that one, Brian.
Well, we want to thank everybody for joining us this hour. I hope you had some great takeaways. You have some action steps written down on your notebook, and that you plan to reach out to us if you would like a clarity call, or if you just want to follow along with us and join our community. I would love that as well. Thank you for your time today. I hope you guys have a great day.
That's right. Thank you, y'all. Enjoy the journey.